Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and we're really happy to virtually see you on Slack now. So today we're going to be talking about some of the things that have happened in Canada around digital preservation, specifically how we've identified some things that need work and how we're trying to address that at the national level through collaborative action. We'd first like to acknowledge speaking for myself, I'm in Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island, which is the unceded traditional territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and it is a great privilege to be working from here. Grant?
Thanks. My name is Grant Hurley. I'm very privileged to live and work in Toronto, or otherwise known as Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, which was signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
Thanks so much, Grant. I'm the Digital Preservation Librarian, which is a relatively new position at the University of Victoria, and I also work with the Canadian Association of Research Libraries as a visiting program officer.
My name is Grant Hurley. I work as the Digital Preservation Librarian at Scholars Portal, which is the information technology service provider for members of the Ontario Council of University Libraries, or OCUL. So our story begins in 2016 when the Canadian Association of Research Libraries created the Digital Preservation Working Group, or DPWG. And this group actually grew out of more informal sort of meetups and phone calls that practitioners were having in Canada, including Corey, my supervisor, Alan Darnell, and my esteemed colleague, Steve Marks. And then new members were invited to round out this group from a variety of stakeholder organizations, others in academic libraries, representatives of consortia like myself, and members of government as well. So we have a really wonderful group of members as part of the DPWG. And so when it was formed, it had a few initial goals set out. One of them was a survey on digital preservation capacity and readiness in Canada, which is what I'm going to be talking about mostly for the rest of the presentation. There was also hope for a national forum on digital preservation, which did happen in Montreal back in November 2018. They wanted to establish a web archiving community of practice, which Corey will speak quite a bit more about a little later. It's called QUAC. And finally, there was a goal to articulate an awareness and advocacy strategy. Next slide. So the goals of the survey were to establish a clear picture of the state of digital preservation activities in Canada, and identify gaps in capacity needs at institutions, and help inform future resource commitments, research projects, and opportunities for collaboration. Essentially just to get a picture of what was happening where. Everyone, of course, knew informally about sites of practice or expertise, but it hadn't really been fully documented up to this point. Next slide. So the survey was developed somewhat iteratively. It started in summer 2017 and was developed and rolled out as a first phase to members of the Canadian Association of Research Libraries in late 2017. The following year, it was rolled out again to a broader set of memory organizations. Any kind of heritage or memory organization in Canada that wanted to apply was welcome to. There were phased reports that were published on each of those different chunks, and then a final report was published in November 2019. It's available both in English and French, and also as an accompanying data set if you're interested in digging a bit deeper. So we had 52 respondents in total. The majority of these were from academic libraries, including CARL members, as well as academic libraries outside of CARL. We also had a few government-based organizations representing municipal, provincial, and national levels. And we had some responses from community-based or nonprofit organizations, including some specialty archives. So pretty good group of respondents. Because most of the respondents are from the academic sector, I did want to give our American colleagues a little picture of what things are like here in Canada. So we do have about 75 academic institutions that are members of the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, which is the national licensing consortium. And they have student populations ranging from about 500 to 500,000, 2,000 students up to 87,000 students, which is our largest institution at the University of Toronto. A segment of these are members of CARL. CARL has 29 members. They have student populations from about 8,000 and up, and the average student population for CARL members about 30,000 full-time students. And just for even more perspective, Canada's population overall is smaller than the state of California, but spread over a much larger geographic region. All right, next slide. So I'm going to start off by talking about the results from the perspective of organizational commitment. 38% of our respondents had language that expressed some kind of commitment to digital preservation, published in a strategic plan, mandate, or mission statement. And then another 40% had plans to make this happen in some way. 81% had an individual or group responsible for coordinating digital preservation activities across their organization. And 44% had a committee or working group related to digital preservation at their organization. Similarly, kind of in the realm of higher level work around policies and procedures, 17% had an approved digital preservation policy or set of policies. And the chart on the left shows a whole bunch of other folks who had policies in draft form or in discussion or review. And 71% had some form of workflow or procedure documentation. And so between these two sort of slides, you can start to see a pattern develop where there's a small proportion of institutions who have programs that are very much active with formalized policies and procedures, formalized commitment to doing preservation, people at their institutions who are committed to coordinating this work, and then a probably larger majority of respondents for whom their programs are kind of in progress. They're bits and pieces in development and testing, essentially ad hoc in nature. Next slide. So this is definitely true when it comes to talking about storage. One thing to note is that all respondents have digital collections. No one said that they didn't have something. So at the very least, every respondent was in scope in terms of digital preservation work. And the median amount of collections, data, and storage was 20 terabytes. The most commonly used storage methods for those collections were things like local servers and external media like hard drives, CDs, and DVDs. Least commonly used storage methods, falling at 50% of respondents or below, were cloud-based networks, tape, and replicated storage services like LOCKSS networks. Respondents were also asked to identify particular tools for preservation processing, and this could include more complex stacks like Archimedica or Preservica, as well as more lightweight tools like use of bags or scripted in-house workflows. So 21% of respondents overall reported using any one tool for preservation processing in production. However, similar to the sort of general theme, another 27% reported using at least one tool in a testing capacity. Similarly, we had a third of respondents using tools for digital forensics in order to safely capture data from external media like hard drives and floppy disks. Next slide. A big area of interest for me was the level of staffing reported for digital preservation work. So on average, staff with responsibilities for digital preservation represented less than 1% of all full-time equivalents at respondent organizations. So we asked respondents to list job titles with some sort of responsibility for digital preservation work at their institution, and also assign an estimated time equivalent for that work. So to put it another way, for every 100 staff members at an organization, less than one of them is supporting digital preservation as part of their job. There were a lucky few institutions, 18%, who at least had one person, one full-time person supporting this work. And there was a small minority, I think 2 respondents, who actually had more than one person doing this work, so 2 out of 52. 48% of the 166 roles listed that had FTE values assigned had actually between 0 and 20% FTE assigned to that role. So that's just under half of the jobs listed had less than 20% FTE assigned to digital preservation. So to me, that really signals that a lot of this work is very much on the side of someone's desk at this point. Similarly, 28% of job titles listed belong to a senior administrator of some kind, a manager, a director, university librarian, associate university librarian, a city archivist, for example. And to me, that also signals that a lot of this work is still very much in the planning, policy development phase as well. Next slide. As part of the survey, we had respondents identify particular gaps and challenges that they're facing in this work as well. And so these really just kind of confirm the results I've reported on so far. The top one was policy, lack of time or resources for policy development, followed very closely by staffing, and surprisingly, lack of funding for new positions. This was followed by procedures and workflows, lack of time to develop those, lack of resources to pursue organizational change, and then tied for the top spots were staff knowledge and skills for digital forensics work, and lack of money to support tools for preservation processing. And one respondent summarized the issues quite beautifully in a single sentence. They said, our challenges include devoting staff resources, obtaining sustainable long-term storage and infrastructure, formalization of policies, and development of partnerships locally, regionally, and nationally. Basically all of the issues in one phrase. There were some bright lights, however. 75% of the respondents indicated participation in regional, national, or international organizations, conferences, or projects specific to digital preservation. And there were 49 distinct entities, like distinct organizations or projects or whatnot mentioned. So, the basic takeaway is that we have a lot of collaborative efforts in place already and quite a bit of participation in them. And the report actually lists out all of those entities if you really want to see a list. And I think it's a fantastic summary of like everything that's going on in this field on a collaborative level if you're interested in taking a look. Next slide. Another key takeaway for me was that there was no relationship between large, well-resourced organizations and the extent of the digital preservation activities. So I took a selection of the quantitative questions and developed an informal scoring rubric to give a broader picture overall of the capacity among respondents. And then I compared this to statistics on budgets overall, total staff FTEs at our organization, and materials expenditures for the academic libraries. And certainly while some well-resourced institutions were succeeding in this area, there are quite a few of smaller or medium-sized institutions who are also succeeding in this work. So to sum up, we have pockets of expertise and well-developed capacity among a handful of respondents. There were 8% who had well-developed capacity and another 23% right behind them in kind of like the medium-high area. And in real numbers, this translates to about 16 of the 52 respondents. The rest, the other 70% of respondents, reported low capacity or programs that are a work in progress, essentially. And so evidence of this is in the large majority of policies, procedures, statements of mandate and commitment and draft, and tools and workflows and testing, preservation-friendly storage infrastructures that haven't really been operationalized to their capacity, and staff members for whom digital preservation work is very much like a side at the desk or a minority activity. All right, on to you, Corey.
Thank you very much, Grant, for talking about the survey and the results. I'm going to switch gears here, and we're going to look a little bit at an emerging national strategy to tackle some of those issues that were raised. Through the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, the Digital Preservation Working Group was established back in 2016 to basically assess digital preservation capacity. Obviously, the survey was a big part of that, but also things like environmental scans to better understand available resources and to identify and promote relevant approaches, standards, practices, technologies, and really to build a community of practice within Canada and strengthen that community for digital preservation. 4 key areas that we've landed on. The first three are topical, and then web archiving is an activity that was well underway ahead of the establishment of the DPWG, but we felt it would be good to have that under the umbrella of CARL as well. So the areas are infrastructure, policy, and capacity. And so let's dig into those in addition to web archiving, but let's dig into those a little bit more. In terms of infrastructure, what we wanted to do was identify gaps to ensure that people had the tools and the systems and the services available across the country. And how we sort of envisioned that was the DPWG working to help scale institutional or regional infrastructure with a focus on not only preservation processing, things like Archivematica, and storage, which is a big thing, but we also realized that repositories needed to be a focus of attention because people were having a very difficult time connecting repository infrastructure with preservation services as well. So those are sort of the three key areas that we focus in. Now, as you may recall from one of Grant's slides, only about 17% of institutions have formalized policies. So the policy area, the policy subgroup, is focusing on getting copies of all of the policies that are underway and approved through an environmental scan, doing an analysis of those policies, and creating a toolkit based on that to help people build their policies effectively at their local institutions. In many cases, they have things underway. They just need that nudge, that final sort of push to help them get it approved and formalized, which is, of course, a huge part of a successful digital preservation program. Some of those roadblocks are related to a lack of capacity, so a lack of human attention and human resources being assigned in these areas. And so, you know, things like infrastructure and policy, they all sort of interact with this idea of capacity. So we have another subgroup that's focusing on helping institutions articulate human resource needs in this area. So one of the things that we're doing is collecting position descriptions, analyzing those, sharing them, helping people understand what it takes to write one, either for a new position or an existing position. And then we're also providing, in order to provide some context, we're interviewing leadership at exemplar institutions in terms of digital preservation to see if we can tease out some of the successful things that particular institutions do to make digital preservation a higher priority. As Grant mentioned in his slides, capacity did not align with institutional size. So there's some really large institutions that do a really good job and smaller ones as well. So we're hoping to tease out those success matrix. And then, of course, web archiving, which we've been doing for a while. Basically, we've developed a mechanism to talk about the things that we're doing and also to help us get better tools. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Grant.
Thank you, Corey. So the survey was intended to gather evidence of needs in the community, and it really did coalesce into what's become a three-part framework for a national digital preservation strategy. So this is policy, infrastructure, and capacity and staffing. And the hope is that because this strategy reflects actual needs, that it can be a basis upon which sustainable practices are built. And I'm wondering too, and I kind of hope that this actually might be a model for how digital preservation work can be built out at the national level. So these areas can be, of course, built upon and further refined as well by communities of practice, like around web archives and research data management at different levels, nationally and regionally. Of course, we have regional level services, training, coordination at consortia, including point people like myself and Rebecca Dixon at COPL, who are there sort of for consultation and advice. And then, of course, there's institutional level operationalization and stewardship over collections. And that's where all of this conversation has to begin. But to summarize, essentially, effective teams know the strength of their players. And perhaps a key part of sustainability in this field is identifying where the strengths and capacity are, where the resources are nationally, and how to coordinate them to the best effect. So at the national level in Canada, this might mean providing resources for organizational level commitments, planning and policy development, doing the governance work to tie together and develop infrastructure, ensure national coverage of services and infrastructure, coordinate agreements, and build service models. So essentially, here's to preparing our national digital preservation team to become more resilient, cooperative, and active. So stay tuned. Well, I'm excited to see where the DPWG's activities go next. And I do want to thank the folks who participated and supported the survey, first by filling it out, as well as my co-author Kathleen Shearer and Lise Bryn at Carl, who did a huge amount of work in supporting the administration of the survey. And thanks to Corey as well for being my co-presenter today.